An ordinary high school boy suddenly wakes up in another world, as an entire lake. Turns out he reincarnated as the great water spirit, a being capable of healing wounds, curing diseases, and controlling massive amounts of water. At first, he thinks he's trapped forever, until he discovers he can create a human body and leave the lake behind. Now he travels the world, saves people in need, and slowly builds a peaceful village with the friends he meets along the way. The story begins at school, where Saejima Manaji began to fall asleep in class and said that it was another good day to take a nap. However, when he fell asleep, he heard a voice calling his name and saying that she was blessing him. He was transported to a lake, which surprised him greatly, and he wondered why he was underwater. If he didn't float to the surface now, he would drown. Wait. His limbs weren't moving? He didn't have a body at all? It was as if his body was the water. Knowledge began to flow into his mind like a rapid stream. That's how it is. This is a different new world. This lake will be his body. He was reincarnated as the great water spirit. After a few days, he wondered, since he was reincarnated, did he die in his world? What should he do now in the lake? Although at first he suffered, but now his current life doesn't seem so bad. Honestly, it's better here than in that terrible world where he was. Animals from the other world come here. The lake where he lives, the great spirit of water, seems to be able to heal illnesses and wounds. 2 children came to his lake and the boy told his sister that she should be careful with her foot. He noticed this and thought that adults usually don't go here, but these were children. The boy asked, "They'll fix it with a branch, okay?" His sister agreed, and he asked her not to cry. The protagonist thought that there were medicinal herbs inside this basket. Why shouldn't they use it? They approached the lake, knelt down, called out to the Great Spirit, and said that they were asking him to cure their mother of her illness and help them. At that moment, a wolf came to them, began to growl angrily, and they turned to him. When the beast attacked them, he became worried about this and stopped it with water. He was surprised by what happened and wondered if this was his doing. Since he is the spirit of water, he can control it. Everything happened by itself. He didn't even have time to understand it. He was standing on the water, found his clothes a little strange and asked, "Are they both okay?" He changed his clothes, went up to the children and said that everything was fine. They hugged him, and he thought that he understood their language. They screamed loudly and said that they were scared. When they calmed down, he asked who he was. He said his name and thought, "Can you use a name from the real world?" They bowed and he said that he was Lumina, and this was his younger sister Nasia. They were very grateful for the help. They both looked at him with admiration and asked, "By the way, is he a great spirit?" He agreed and said that he was the spirit of the lake. He thought that although this was recent, he touched the wound on her cheek and healed it with the help of magic. They were surprised by this, and he said loudly that they came to ask for help for their mother. He started crying, and MC stroked his head, agreed, and said that he wouldn't tell anyone about it though. They were happy about it and agreed to it. He pointed to the flask she was carrying and asked if he could borrow it. He used magic to direct water there and said that if their mother drank this water, she would be able to get better. They thanked him with a happy expression, and he said that the forest was full of dangers. He began to create a spirit from the water and said that's why he was asking him to guide the children. He managed to do it, thought about a name, and asked if the name Lu would suit him. Great spirits can create familiars for themselves with the same abilities they possess. The children saw this and asked, why did he appear so suddenly? Lumina noticed that he looked so much like their brother Manaji. He felt him nearby. The protagonist replied that this was his friend. After that, he turned to the boy and asked if he wanted to become his comrade. Lumina happily replied that he wanted that. The protagonist said, Lu is now their secret. The children replied that they understood and said goodbye, agreeing to see each other again. MC sent Lu along with Lumina, then said it was time for him to return to the lake. He dove into the depths, sank to the bottom, and wondered why he felt so good. Suddenly, he heard someone calling him from the land. He wondered in surprise, what? Someone was calling him? He heard him again, the Great Spirit, calling for help. MC surfaced in a magical drop and saw dark elves, 2 adults, one holding a child. They were wounded. Etna said, almost in tears, they are being pursued by humans. They fled from them in the hope of his help. He asks him to help their child. He begs him for it. Manaji released a healing drop of water, which fell right into the child's mouth. At that very moment, he opened his eyes, sat up in his father's arms, and asked in surprise, where are they? The parents exclaimed his name in amazement. Luna, the boy's mother, bowed to the protagonist and declared, it's a miracle. All wounds are healed. Etna also bowed his head before the great water spirit and thanked him. The parents rejoiced at their child's miraculous healing. The protagonist thought in surprise, are these 3 dark elves? He'd met them somewhere before, in the lore of another world. He rushed to his water library and found the book. After reading, he realized that dark elves have much in common with spirits. Where most can hear and see otherworldly entities, humans coexist with other elves. But in another world, due to their origins and appearance, dark elves are considered a type of demon who uses the power of darkness against humans. Therefore, humans immediately perceive them as a threat, despite the fact that they have no connection with demons. He shouted to the elves, can they hear him? All 3 of them jumped in surprise and fell to their knees. Etna said they should be polite. MC MC said he knew their problem. If they promised not to pollute the lake, they could stay and live here. Etna asked in surprise, "Is he sure?" The protagonist replied, he was afraid they would only suffer more if they continued on their way. He would do everything possible to ensure they lived a normal life. Etna gratefully said, of course. They were touched by his kindness. He asked their names. The head of the family apologized for not introducing themselves sooner. He told him his name and introduced his wife and son. The protagonist responded by identifying himself as Nagi, spirits of the lake, as they already knew. He thought, so, now a family of dark elves has settled here. After a while, MC thought, by the way, more than a month has passed. How is Lumina doing? He activated the connection with Lu and asked him about the children. The familiar replied that the mother had recovered and the children were happy. The protagonist was delighted. He wondered why he, of all people, had become the great water spirit. Frankly, he had no answer, but he wanted to help everyone. That was what came to mind. With the power he possessed, he could save. He wished he could protect someone right now with just this one hand. He extended his hand upward and activated levitation. When he emerged in his full form, Etna exclaimed in surprise. What? A great spirit had appeared to them? He replied. As far as he could see, they were all well. The elf replied, yes, he was right. He was in a great mood. The protagonist replied, good. Are Luna and Helio also well? The head of the family said, yes. Injuries and illnesses no longer plague them. Now they cultivate the fields. He extended his hand in surprise. Fields? The elf said. They had seeds, and the land here is very fertile. Perhaps many delicious vegetables will grow here. MC responded with a smile. Glad to hear it. Suddenly, he heard a cry for help. He perked up and asked Etna if he'd heard anything just now. The puzzled elf said, no, nothing at all. He heard the voice again, calling for his family's help. They were all he had. A magic circle formed under the protagonist's feet, creating a powerful water vortex that pulled him down. With a scream, he plunged into the depths. In his water form, he followed the voice, not understanding who was calling him. Where was this voice coming from? It led him to prison, which greatly surprised the protagonist. He thought, prison? And he was in a cage now? He saw several children being held in a cage. They looked very dejected. One of the children folded his hands in a prayerful gesture and called on the spirits of the water to help Luto. MC wondered, were they calling him? And this girl, a high elf? If you look closely, no, maybe a half elf? Unlike elves, they can't summon spirits. He activated his form and told the girl that then, as now, he, the great water spirit Nagi, had answered her call. Let him know her name? The surprised child replied, her name was Yona, and Luto was her younger brother. Let him help her only loved one. She would bring back everything she could. Managi wondered if that was why he had been summoned to heal. Yona had a strong and kind soul. He wanted her wish to come true. He activated his magical power, and Yona was astonished to see a mark on her hand. She asked if this was the mark of a contract with the spirits. He replied, yes, the deal was made. He would make her wish come true. With these words, MC placed his hand on her younger brother's head and cast his magic on everyone present. All the children's bracelets and shackles disappeared. Their joy knew no bounds. Ludo opened his eyes and called his sister. Yona cried out joyfully and began to thank the protagonist for saving her brother. He smiled and replied that he was glad her loved one had recovered. He thought he had fulfilled the girl's wish. He shouldn't abandon them in such a terrible place. Nor the other children either. But could he take care of them? He couldn't just leave them. He said out loud, they're leaving here. One of the cubs asked in confusion, they're leaving? He replied, yes, they are. They'll be fine with him. At that moment, a guard shouted, who dared make noise? The protagonist shook with anger. He wondered what this feeling of disgust was about. The guards asked in surprise, who is this? What is he doing here? Let him get out of here. The protagonist's head began to buzz. The guards grabbed one of the children and began to shout, shaking him. He broke his shackles again. This time he felt alive. What could they do? Don't let him yell. Don't let him scream. What are they supposed to do with the sail? The cacophony of sounds and voices made the MC grab his head and scream. One of the guards asked in surprise, is he too loud? The protagonist cursed him and unleashed a powerful magical stream of water on the opponents. They tried to resist this powerful force, shouting at each other to keep going. Then one of them shouted, who is he? The protagonist created enormous water hands and ominously asked, does the great water spirit tell him anything? Let him rely on him. With these words, the magical water hands dealt damage to the opponents, and they fell unconscious to the floor. The MC opened the cage and told the children it was okay, they could come out. A male voice rang out behind him, but no. The protagonist turned sharply and saw a group of men, all belligerent. The leader continued. He wanted to attack a legitimate trading operation and accuse them of slavery and child abduction, and cruelty to them too. The protagonist looked at them and asked, what's that? The head guard added, he's not a wizard, but a spirit. And what did he want with his children? MC, activating his water magic, replied, he came to save them from monsters like them. With these words, he attacked the enemies, who immediately fell from the powerful force of the water attack. He declared what a water spirit he was then. Now he and his comrades were under his watch. If he ever had another child enslaved, there would be no next time. The protagonist and the children went outside. He spoke, and so they emerged. Looking around, he noticed a large city. But what should they do now? Go back to the lake? He didn't know what that place was. First, they needed to determine where they were. Yona turned to him, confused. He turned and saw the children clutching their stomachs. The protagonist thought he didn't need food, so he didn't notice that these children needed to be fed something. But he didn't have any money on him. He looked at the bakery stall. The owner called out to him and asked if he was going to buy anything. MC replied that he had nothing. The woman looked at the children in surprise and remarked, "He had a large family. Aren't they different races?" He asked, "How should I put it? In fact, they are free brothers and sisters, reunited again." Looking at the merchant's confusion, he thought sheepishly, "Perhaps that was a mistake," she said, confused. "I see." With tears in her eyes, the woman added, "They must have been sick. Children shouldn't suffer." With these words, she handed them the pastries and told them to eat as much as they wanted. After a while, he looked at the happily munching children and thought, although there are bad people, there are still more good ones. Then he told the merchant that they were lost by the way. She replied that this was the southern part of the Luna Kingdom, the small town of Illness. He wondered if it was a country near a lake, surprised. After that, Manaji said, "I'd like to earn some extra money. What can I do here?" The woman, after thinking for a moment, replied, "To get back on his feet, he can master the skills of a craftsman or a merchant." But he wanted a lot of money right away? If so, then this was the Adventurers Guild. After some time, he came to this organization. It was crowded. He thought in surprise, adventurers. Their work is dangerous, but the rewards are good. Approaching the application stand, the protagonist noticed there were many requests. It seemed they could make good money. The receptionist asked if he was interested in something. He replied, yes, he would like to accept the request. She prompted him that first he needed to register as an adventurer. The girl handed him a document and said, "Please have him fill it out here." After filling out the necessary paperwork, he asked, "Will this do?" He wrote down his name, race, and skill. A short time later, the girl said registration was complete. The level starts with adventurer. The request matched what he saw on the board. The protagonist said he was thinking about collecting medicinal herbs for level 10. She replied that she would accept his request immediately. At that moment, there was a noise, and a panicked male voice asked everyone to disperse. Someone helped them. The basilisk had beaten up their comrade. Two adventurers entered the guild, holding their comrade, Philly, by the arms. Sans told the girl to hold on. They were already in the guild. Those present began to mutter, "A basilisk? That's very cruel. It looks like Philly won't survive." MC looked at the injured girl and noted that the basilisk had apparently affected whoever hit her, so its healing might be ineffective. At that moment, Yona addressed him. She looked at him with compassionate eyes and said, "Let him help this man." Manaji smiled and replied, "Okay, let her trust him." Stroking the girl's head, he thought he decided to do everything in his power, but not stand out. Seeing the injured girl's friends trying to give her some water, he activated the healing spell and directed it at the water in the glass. When Philly drank the liquid, before the astonished eyes of her comrades, she opened her eyes, jumped up, and cried out, "Basilisk!" Looking around, she sheepishly noted, "Oh, this is the guild?" MC told the children that Philly was safe now, and they would go gather herbs. Gand, looking at his ally, exclaimed, "The medicine worked." Philly shook her head in confusion. He called out to her anxiously, asking if she was okay. The girl touched her head with her hand and said that she felt a divine presence the moment she woke up. It seemed she was mistaken. It was just her imagination. But this sign? At that moment, MC hurried the children down the street, telling them to immediately let him know if they were tired or fell. At that moment, Philly called out to him and asked him to wait. The protagonist and the children stopped. The girl bowed to him and said that he had done a good deed for her earlier. He had healed her. He, the great water spirit? He stared at her in confusion. Her allies rushed out after her. Dan called out to her and asked, "What is she thinking?" She had just recovered. Sans added, "Now she needs to rest." The protagonist thought that since she was an elf, she was probably sensitive to the presence of a spirit. He hadn't expected to be recognized so quickly. The girl apologized to him and said she just wanted to thank the Great Spirit. The boys exclaimed in surprise, "Is that really it? He really is one?" If Philly said so, then it must be true. He decided it probably wouldn't matter if he was recognized. He raised his hand in greeting and replied, "Yes, he is a water spirit." Philly exclaimed in confusion. It was a great honor to meet him. She was so grateful to him. She would never forget his help. Suddenly, she staggered and began to fall. He caught her and asked if she was okay. Philly replied that since he helped her, everything was fine. Yusin, watching them, said that they were busy talking. MC looked at him and asked, "Who is he?" The man replied, "He is in charge of the Yusin Guild." It seemed he had helped Philly earlier. Let him forgive him for interrupting, but he overheard their conversation. Looking at the children, the man remarked that it wasn't very convenient to talk here. If he wanted, they could continue it in the guild. After some time, the protagonist and the children settled into the guild's meeting room. Yusin bowed to the great water spirit and said that he had saved one of the guild's most precious members. A huge thank you to him for that. By the way, why is he here? The protagonist looked at Yon and replied that this child had summoned him. He then told the man how he had gotten here. Philly exclaimed in surprise. She was so glad the children had been saved. However, she couldn't believe such a thing was possible. Half-elf, I can't believe she summoned the greatest spirit. She turned to Manaji and asked, He knows what he's capable of, right? Only beings like high-ranking elves. Yusun remarked that yes, it was unheard of for half-elves to do such a thing. MC looked at the confused girl in surprise. Yusun continued, but for now, let him take this as gratitude. With these words, he handed him a pouch of money. The protagonist began to refuse it. The man thanked him for saving Philly. By the way, he'd heard that only elves and those especially gifted in magic could encounter spirits. For him, an ordinary person, it was a great honor to meet one. This was a great joy. The protagonist thought he hadn't realized before that spirits were rare and that they were respected was in fact something amazing for him. Out loud, he replied, then let them accept his words in return. A huge thank you to them for their gift. Yusun happily said, anything for him, he thought. Although he felt a little awkward, this was a good opportunity. Out loud, he said, then, I have a small request. Sometime later, when the children were settled and they were all fast asleep, MC thought, everyone's sleeping well. He was glad the guild had arranged housing for them. Suddenly, Yona came to him. He asked in surprise, what happened? She can't sleep. The girl bowed to him and thanked him for his help. And may he forgive her for calling on him for help. The protagonist looked at her, remembered her in chains, and thought about how he'd seen this child endure terrible conditions for a long time. His self-esteem had plummeted. Even if Philly was surprised, it bothered him greatly. He squatted down in front of Yona, stroked her head, and replied, there's no need to apologize. She's his summoner and his steward. Besides, if she hadn't summoned him, he's not sure he would have seen the outside world. He's so glad he met her. Tears welled up in Yona's eyes. At that moment, Philly's voice came from behind the door. He opened it, and the girl said she was sorry to bother him so late, but they had received urgent business from the guild. The protagonist replied, okay, he understood, but he has children. The Gond, who was standing next to the girl, said, please let him leave them to him. Sans, who was also with them, smiled warmly. MC thought there was sincerity in these people. It seemed like it wouldn't be a problem to entrust the children to them. He turned to Yona and told her to forgive him. He had urgent matters and couldn't stay with her overnight. Philly would take care of her in his stead. She looked at him with fear. The protagonist crouched down in front of her and asked her not to make such a face. He would definitely return. Taking her little finger in his, he added with a smile, he's casting a spell. He promises her that he will return. Yona laughed and replied, okay, she'll wait for him. After a while, MC arrived. Suddenly he heard a rustling sound and felt a change in the aura. He thought, the one they're looking for is the basilisk. Before leaving on the mission, Yusun apologized for yanking him away so rudely, but he needed his advice as a great spirit. The protagonist replied, I understand. Are you talking about the basilisk? He lives in the undeveloped regions and possesses immense strength and a powerful body. Philly and her friends were attacked by a basilisk. When he heard about the incident, he had a bad feeling, Yusun said sadly. After his arrival, he received a message from the guild confirming the female's enlarged abdomen. The basilisks are now rapidly approaching the city in search of a feeding ground. He would like to make a second request. The reward for this emergency quest is 20 million gold. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise. Such a sum? Yusun bowed to him and exclaimed, he's the only one I can trust. Let him help them. MC thought, that's enough money for the trip. Now isn't the time to think about that, but about innocent people. He rose to his feet and said, I understand. He will take on the emergency quest. The man joyfully thanked him and assured him that the city, will always remember his generosity. Manaji sheepishly replied, he shouldn't exaggerate. And now there, looking at the basilisks, he thought, so, what should I do? The female monster stared at him, casting her influence on him. He felt it and was surprised. Even he, a great creature, was affected by petrification? If he was so susceptible, he should change his form to one that made fighting easier. With these thoughts in mind, the protagonist assumed his water snake form and noted that the influence wasn't working. Now he seemed stronger. Why not try fighting? The monsters stared at him in surprise and began attacking. The protagonist parried all their attacks, but didn't immediately manage to damage the female basilisk. He continued to attack her with his magic, and finally managed to defeat her, despite her resistance. He thought she was more powerful than he expected. The second basilisk, having assessed the situation, attempted to escape. MC rushed after it, saying, it's a pity, but he won't let it escape. He dealt with this monster much more quickly. The enemy tried his best to resist him, but it was all in vain. Having defeated the second basilisk, Manaji approached the dead female, placed his hand on her belly, and recalled Yusun's words about her belly growing. Afterwards, he apologized to her. Suddenly, he noticed movement in the trees and, addressing them as if they were members of the guild, announced that he had fulfilled the request. They were surprised. Had he noticed them? The protagonist asked them to retrieve the enemy's body. Suddenly, something fell in front of him. He realized it was a mass communication ability. It seemed the town meeting would soon begin. He said aloud that it was time for them to return as well. After a while, Yusun admiringly told him that no one really expected him to return so quickly. Thank him for saving the town from the impending threat. The man prostrated himself before him. The protagonist was embarrassed by such an honor and said, oh well. Yusun placed several purses of money in front of him and said, here's his reward. He thought in surprise, so much? And how was he supposed to carry it all? Yusun handed him a bag and said, let him use this. A bag for a certain amount of luggage. He placed a couple of purses of money in it, adding, Now he can carry this with him everywhere. MC looked at the remaining purses and the magic bag and thought, interesting. Yushin said, there's one more reward he'd like to give him. He opened a small box containing a golden name card and said, a 4th class adventurer's card. Let him keep it. Manaji exclaimed in surprise. 4th class? The man replied, considering his achievements, even a 1st class would have been enough, but he only had the power to grant a 4th class. The protagonist replied that that wasn't what he had in mind. He thought, thank you. Yushin mentioned the dead basilisk, by the way. The guild had bought it for him. He should wait a couple of days for the appraisal. The protagonist, taking the money and bag, stood up and replied that he understood everything and thanked him for everything. The man objected. What was he talking about? He should be the one thanking him. The MC asked if they could return to the lake while they waited. After a while, walking through the city, he wondered why the basilisk was in the forest near the city. They usually live far from people. Had they decided to move closer, or had someone forced them to do so? How normal was everything? At that moment, the adventurers and children called out to him. He asked in surprise why they were in front of the inn. Philly replied that the children had just woken up, and Yona declared that she couldn't wait for Manaji and wanted to meet him outside. The children rushed to greet him and joyfully shouted, welcome back, welcome home. He hugged them with a smile and extended his hand. Yes, he was home. After that, they excitedly asked, will they prepare for tomorrow's trip? A real journey. They're heading to their master's lake. What kind of lake is that? The protagonist thought for a moment and replied that it's rich in nature, has a good harvest, and a comfortable life. The elves living there are happy. They ended up there because they found themselves in the same situation as them. So, they'll become friends. The children began chattering happily. Can you fish at the lake? Can you swim there? Everyone wanted to. At that moment, Gand turned to Philly. She said, if he has a request, let him speak. After listening to her friend, she turned to MC and said she was glad he was safe. He replied that he owed her thanks for his help too. The girl countered, no, it was nothing compared to the service he'd rendered them. Let him forgive her, but she had a favor to ask. Could they accompany them on their journey? He asked in surprise. Why? She exclaimed. He saved her life. To repay his kindness, she wanted to help. The protagonist paused, puzzled. But her allies? The boys replied with a smile that they felt the same way as Philly. Please, let them repay him for saving their city. The children happily asked, is their sister coming too? Philly smiled at them and replied, yes. He smiled at the children surrounding the adventurers and thought warmly, they miss him. The allies bowed to him and asked again if they could accompany them. The protagonist replied, he understood. Yes, of course, they can come with them. Philly joyfully thanked him and added, she will do everything she can to help him. Afterwards, they all visited a clothing store, bought new clothes for the children, and then went to the market, where they bought sweets from a familiar vendor. Recognizing them, she burst into tears of joy and began hugging them. At that moment, the adventurers pulled up a cart filled to the brim with various things. Yusin approached him, handed him a large purse of money, and said it was the reward for the basilisk. MC was surprised, so much. After all, he had received it. The man asked if he was leaving already. He replied that he was, and thanked him for seeing them off. Yusin said that this was a big thank you for their help. In the future, he should definitely visit them. They will receive him with all honors and hospitality. The protagonist replied that this was already enough. When everyone was seated in the cart, he asked, well, is everyone ready? Then off we go. They left Ilmus and headed for the lake. Their next destination was the small town of Luwanan. The protagonist thought the children would be worried because they didn't know where they were being taken. But they were distracted by the changing landscapes, the fun of the hike, and the self-improvement techniques taught to them by Gand and Sans. Yona and her younger brother, Luto, had magical abilities. She and Philly were demonstrating the magic of spirits to them. It wasn't long until Luwanan. When he arrived, he would have a good rest at the inn. Sometime later, when they arrived in Luwanan, the inn door was angrily slammed in MC and Philly's faces. The innkeeper yelled, it's a shame he's full. Let him hit him. Philly said regretfully, there are no more inns in this town. They're all closed. He replied, it can't be helped. It's bad timing. He could only hope Gand and Sans had found something. At that moment, the adventurers arrived and shouted, they're back. He asked, how did it go? Gand replied that it seemed like preparing the house would take some time. They couldn't check in today. If they couldn't find an inn, they should try renting a room. Sans noted that, judging by their appearance, the last inn hadn't been suitable either. Yona turned to the protagonist and said that if they spent the night in the forest, everything would be fine. He replied that they should forgive him, but for their sake, he still wanted them to have a roof over their heads. At that moment, Smolka approached them and remarked that they seemed to be in trouble. The allies looked at him warily. He exclaimed, he wasn't a bad person. The protagonist thought in surprise. A child? He told him to forgive them. They were new to this city and didn't know what was going on here, and since he was with children, they were trying to be careful. The boy looked at him in surprise and asked, are they looking for a place to stay? The protagonist answered, yes. Smolka said he knew a good place. Let them follow him. Philly asked MC if they should go. He said the boy was harmless. He didn't sense any ill intentions from this child. If anything happened, he would protect them. The adventurers smiled and remarked that they would also protect him and the children, even if it cost them their lives. He indignantly replied, They don't have to sacrifice that. He wanted to hide the fact that he was a spirit. Let them be less respectful of him. Philly folded her hands in front of her face in a prayerful gesture and said, I understand. She respected him within these limits. Manaji wondered in surprise, what limits? The allies followed the boy. After a while, Gon noticed they were walking a long way to the outskirts of the city. At that moment, Smolka shouted, come here. Turning to the door of the building, he shouted to Millen that they were back. A girl emerged from the door and congratulated him on his return. Thank him for his hard work. The boy added, he brought them a guest. She smiled at the guests and wished them a good evening. Smolka asked if these people would stay here overnight. The girl said their conditions weren't the best, but let them stay with them. The protagonist asked in surprise, really? They have so many people? Melina said kindly, of course. Don't worry. They have plenty of beds. This place for the Sale believers is essentially an orphanage. Only now did he notice worried little children peering out from behind her. MC thought with confusion. This wasn't the best place, but they would be happy if they decided to stay. He needed to calm the children down, and for that, he needed to make the atmosphere more relaxed. He pulled out his guild card and, after apologizing to the children for frightening them, added that they were adventurers. His companions had no relatives and were looking for a safe place to live, so they set off on their journey. The children exchanged puzzled glances. At that moment, Yona approached the children and said, please forgive them, but their master and everyone else are very kind. They care for them, and they truly are good people. They will behave well, so please let them in. The protagonist thought of the girl with gratitude. Finally, the children smiled and replied, okay. Yona looked at them sheepishly and thanked them. Philly, smiling, remarked that these words were worth a lot. The protagonist bowed to Melina and asked if she could let them stay the night. She laughed and replied, of course, let them come inside. He handed Melina a purse of money, placed it in her hands, and said, please let her take this as payment for their stay. The girl protested, no, she can't take that. The MC assured her it was fair compensation. She finally smiled and replied, okay, she'll cook a dinner that'll justify the money. Philly laughed and remarked that she could help her. After a while, the children, looking at the richly laid table, rejoiced. It was a celebration. Everything looked so delicious. Melina told Philly she was sorry she had to ask her for help. The girl laughed and replied, nothing. The protagonist asked in surprise, does she always cook for so many people? Melina replied, there are other employees, but they're all working. Philly said, come to think of it, this place is run by representatives of the Sale religion. What does that even mean? The girl replied, in this religion, they work to help the weak. Working at the orphanage is also part of their doctrine. They revere the goddess of water, the queen of water spirits, and are committed to faith in God's merciful will. Philly exclaimed admiringly, what a good deed. The protagonist felt a little awkward. Smolka thanked him for the food. Melina asked in surprise, is there any food left, or was he already full? The boy said sadly, this is a feast. When everything returned to normal, he wanted to remember this evening. Suddenly, he enthusiastically exclaimed, so that Melina and the others could have fun, he will work harder. The other children, one after another, also said, and they, too, will work hard when they grow up. Their sister covered her mouth with her hands and could barely hold back her tears. Then, gaining control of her emotions, she said, they are all so great. Thank them. Only this makes her happy. Sometime later, when the children were sleeping, Melina offered a prayer to her gods, thanking them for watching over them today. MC transformed into his water form and addressed the girl in the form of a drop of water. She stared at the drop in confusion. He wished her good evening and added that he was a great water spirit. He was impressed by her actions towards the children. He wants her to exchange this spiritual stone for money. With these words, the object fell into the girl's hands. Melina spoke in complete confusion. A great water spirit right in front of her? Is this a dream? Moreover, how could she sell something so wonderful? He replied that he wanted his children to be happy. Please let her sell it for him. She fell prostrate before him and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Then she asked how she could repay him for this favor. He answered as before, let her cherish and love the children. That is her payment. Melina tearfully swore this to him. The next day, the allies set out. MC thanked the girl for letting them stay. Let her please continue like this. She replied with a smile. All right, she will try her best for the children. Philly remarked that she looked so happy. He agreed with this. Luto joyfully asked, will they be leaving soon? The protagonist replied, not yet. They need to gather information from the Travelers Guild. Is bad weather expected? Are there any ferocious monsters along the way? Gan said he'd spend at least 3 days exploring the route to ensure everyone's safety. Philly asked where they'd be staying during that time. Sans replied that everything was fine. He'd taken the house yesterday. Gand added that they'd been told they'd be ready to hand it over today. The protagonist, surprised, thought, as expected of adventurers, they were very skilled. Suddenly, the aura around them changed, becoming heavy and viscous. A huge raven perched on a tree branch looked closely at the MC and ominously said, they'll meet very soon. With these words, the raven took flight and disappeared. A few feathers from this strange bird swirled in the air. The protagonist exclaimed in bewilderment, what just happened? After some time, the raven, having taken human form, said that she was looking forward to meeting him, the reincarnated man from Japan. Sometime later, MC came to the Adventurers Guild with Gand to investigate the route to the lake and assure them it was safe. He said that it seemed like Philly and Sanas were at the guild yesterday too. They said that the monsters had become more active, and the number of people appearing on the roads had increased significantly. He agreed and said that in addition, there had been reports of a black dragon flying over the neighboring city of Farron. He was absolutely sure that something strange was going on. He agreed with this and wondered if a dragon was a powerful and noble race that rarely appeared in public. Was it even normal for people like them to openly appear in the sky? He said that in general, he was at a loss because if they left the city now, they could put the children in danger. He asked what they would do. Maybe they should stay in the city for a little while longer? They heard someone loudly say that everyone should gather in the guild in front of the notice board. They followed them and he asked, "I wonder what's going on there?" The guild worker said that they needed to tell everyone something. Monster activity had increased over the past few days, and accordingly, the number of people on the roads had also increased. Their guild conducted an investigation. She said loudly in a very concerned tone that they had concluded that a dangerous feral monster was to blame. To avoid damage to the city, they need adventurers of level 5 and above. All such adventurers are invited to join a special monster hunting party. Each member of this party will receive a reward of 100,000 coins. Also, of course, a huge thank you from the guild. Gan said that they seem to be in trouble. Who will participate? He, Philly, or Sans? Manaji agreed and asked then if he could join him in the hunting party. The other two will watch the children in the meantime. He was very surprised by this and said that he himself would jump into a dangerous situation. He said with a calm expression that this seemed to be the fastest way to deal with the problem. If the battle with the monsters dragged on, unforeseen circumstances might arise. If he joined in person, the problems would end faster. The people in the city would feel safe, and they would continue their journey. They would solve two problems at once. He still doubted, and said that there was some truth in it. He was about to say something, but he said in a confident voice that if he came back and explained, Philly would probably stop him. So they needed to apply as soon as possible and leave for work. After that, they arrived at the place where they had to apply for participation. He looked around and said that a lot of people had gathered and it seemed they were all adventurers. He felt the elf's gaze on him, gestured for silence, and thought that elves were very sensitive to spirits. A girl approached him, patted him on the shoulder, and asked if he was also a traveling adventurer. Her name is Feiru. She is a level 4 boxer. Nice to meet you. She shook his hand, he reciprocated, introduced himself, and said that he was a level 4 water mage. He noticed that she had a strong grip and said that this was Gand, a level 4 swordsman. She asked with a happy look, "So they are some kind of team?" He agreed. An old man approached them and said that they should all be silent. He was grateful that they accepted the invitation. His name is Gildo. He is the guild master. What he is about to say is strictly forbidden to spread. If they cannot hide it, then he asks them to leave immediately. He will get straight to the point. Adantadel is heading to the city. The protagonist thought that it was a monster that belongs to a subspecies of dragons due to its ferocity and huge body about 10 meters long. They say that nothing remained of the places where it passed. It is also known as a gluttonous demon, not flying, but crawling on the ground. Gildo said that is why the reconnaissance unit is responsible for it. It is precisely because of it that all the monsters have become active. A defensive line was created to protect the city, and they must defeat this monster before it crosses that line. The monster's movement speed is very slow. Even if the defensive line is broken, there will be enough time to evacuate all the residents. However, it is worth considering that if it is not stopped, the damage to the city will be invaluable. First, he will ask everyone to introduce themselves so they can understand each other's strength. The guy raised his hand and said that he will begin. His name is Naj, a second-level spearman. The other adventurer standing nearby said that he is Nuo, a second-level magic swordsman. He is Luo, a second-level healer. MC looked around and thought that there were quite a lot of strong people here. He noticed the elf who noticed him, and with a tense expression, she said her name was Furio, a user of spiritual arts. He thought it was no longer just respect, but fear. He raised his hand, hesitantly introduced himself, and said he was a 4th-level mage. Gildo picked up the documents and said that from now on, everyone should gather in small teams and then discuss a common strategy. Here is a list of all the available materials. They can use everything for the greater good. Nej helped distribute the lists, which they began to read, and asked then, how about choosing a leader for the elite team of hunters? The adventurers agreed and asked, however, who should they choose? He would like the leader to be someone of high rank, someone capable of organizing and uniting all these people. He is confident in his abilities, but it is unlikely that this will be enough for the role of leader. Manaji thought that something was expected of him, but he could not say what exactly. Feiru raised her hand and said she wanted to recommend Nai for the role of leader. He was the strongest here and best suited for the position. The other adventurers agreed and said he wouldn't mind either. He was a good candidate. He asked if they were absolutely sure. There were adventurers here even better than him. He raised his hand, also supporting his candidacy, and Furio, standing nearby, followed suit. The other adventurers also agreed, after which he picked up a map, hung it on the board, and said that then they would begin discussing strategy. First, they needed to talk about the line of defense. The protagonist looked at him and thought that this was the first time he had teamed up with someone for a major battle. He should act like a normal adventurer, except in emergency situations, so as not to end up in a dangerous situation with Gand. Later, Naj concluded the discussion and said that that was all for today. They would see each other tomorrow. The adventurers began to say goodbye, and he stretched and asked if they were going home. He stopped because Furio called out to him loudly and said with admiration that it was a great honor for her to meet him. He said her name and said that everything was fine. It wasn't that big of an honor. They were in the same hunting party, after all. She said loudly that it wasn't about that. This was a wonderful opportunity to offer him to stay in their house while he was in this city. He would be gladly received there. He said that he was very grateful to her for the offer, but there were people waiting for him. She said that they were happy to welcome anyone associated with him. He didn't need to worry about the number. It seemed their mansion would definitely be enough for any number of people. After some time, they told Philly what happened, and she said loudly, in a shocked tone, that she kept wondering why they returned home so late. That's what happened. Why didn't he stop him? Gand, looking confused, said that he tried to stop him, but he went anyway, and there was no need to blame him for that. He had already tried his best. She calmed down a bit and said that there was nothing to be done. MC asked if the two of them could continue to take care of the children, right? She sighed with displeasure and said that she understood everything. They would take care of them. By the way, who is this? He was a little surprised that they had come so early, opened the door and asked, were they already here? Furio and Fair were standing outside the door. They greeted each other, and she told the master that they had come for them. He said with a smile that they were both members of an elite squad of hunters. He introduced the elf and said that they would disturb her mansion. He looked at her and wondered, by the way, what was she doing here? She noticed that he was looking at her and smiled widely at him. He hoped that she would not cause any trouble and told the children that now he would show them the surroundings. Later, they moved into the mansion. The children fell asleep in their beds. He approached her and said that he was grateful that she was able to shelter such a large group of people. Furio declined, saying there was nothing to thank her for. It was nothing compared to her joy and happiness at meeting him. Bear stood nearby and said she was still troubled by one question. Why did she worship him so much? This was their first meeting, right? She was confused by this, and he thought that since they had come so far, it seemed like he could open up to her too. He said that in fact he was the great water spirit. After that, he told them about how he met Philly and the children, and also about how this city was a stopover on their journey to the lake. They were touched by this. Furio began to cry and said that she expected nothing less from the master. What great mercy. Philly agreed, and she said that it was amazing that he was the great water spirit. However, at the same time, she had already guessed something like this about him being a complex person. From their very first meeting, she was sure, which is why she was so curious and followed him so far. She extended her hand to him and said that since unforeseen circumstances arose in the city on their journey to the lake, they needed to hurry. They must succeed in the hunt for Adon-Tuttle. Manaji shook her hand, thanked her, and said he was counting on her. He later reflected that the members of the hunting party had spent several days meticulously planning and preparing for the hunt for Adon-Tuttle. Philly waved, wished him luck, and said they must defeat the monster, but they must be careful. Yona, looking cheerful, said they should take care. He agreed and said they should wait. They would soon return safe and sound. They met up with the other adventurers, and he thought it was finally time to begin defending against Adon-Tuttle. After all, they had been assigned to the front lines, and immediately began preparing for its attack. Nogsh stood before the adventurers and said that this was enough for a barrier. The magic squad would support the vanguard from here. The protagonist approached him, touched the ground with his finger, cast magic, and created a deep puddle. He asked, well, that's fine. Maybe we should make it deeper and bigger? He was surprised by this and said that it was quite sufficient. This trap was made by taking advantage of the viscous geological characteristics of the area. He thought that this soil became very hard after drying. It seemed to be used to build castle walls. For some reason, it strongly reminded him of cement. The adventurers began to create magic circles on the ground, and Nog said that this was enough for preparation. One carelessness could lead to many deaths, especially considering the power of their enemy. The adventurers said that the sun was already setting. According to intelligence, the main phase of their operation will begin tomorrow morning. They should all rest and gain strength before the upcoming battle. They can disperse. MC's attention was drawn to a man who said that the magic he used recently was amazing. He turned around and saw Nuo and Luo, who said that it was amazing that such a swamp could be created in the blink of an eye. He thanked them for their praise, and they said that after finishing their operation, they would like to steal some of his time. Someone wanted to meet him. He became a little nervous and asked who they wanted him to meet. They bowed to him and said that they could not go into details now. However, this person really wanted to meet him, so they asked. He looked at them and thought that they felt a direct trust in the person they wanted to introduce him to, and he did not sense any malicious intent from them at all. He agreed to this. They raised their heads and thanked him with a joyful look. He waved at them and thought that he wondered what kind of person he was, even if he was curious, but for now he needed to concentrate on Adantadel. The next morning, the adventurers saw a huge monster from behind the rocks and said that he could already see it. This monster was rushing straight towards the city. Adantadel was heading towards them and destroying rocks in its path. The monster fell into the swamp they had prepared in advance, and Naj loudly gave the order to begin. Manaji heard this and immediately removed the water from the swamp to restrain the monster. The adventurers rejoiced at this, thinking they had already won, but he loudly declared that it was still too early. At that moment, the monster easily pulled its legs out of the ground and moved on. The adventurers became worried about this and loudly asked, didn't it have any effect? Then they needed to activate the depth charge. They activated the magic circles, and a very powerful explosion occurred under Adantadel. The dust from the explosion began to clear, and they saw that the monster was unharmed by this attack and let out a loud roar. They became even more worried about this and loudly asked, didn't even that have any effect? Naj loudly declared that they must stop panicking. The squad of mages should continue to hit it with spells. They must delay him at least for a little while. Every second counted. The protagonist watched this and thought that the impulse was affecting the erected barrier. He created a large barrier around the adventurers and the monsters, and loudly announced that he had placed another barrier of his own on top of the general one. They could leave the defense to him and attack. Nage praised him and loudly said that the vanguard should take charge. He ran forward with them, jumped high into the air, and delivered a very powerful blow with his spear. The other adventurers also joined the fight, and he watched from the sidelines and thought that the battle of the adventurers had begun. The monster let out an incredibly loud howl, which caused most of the adventurers' eardrums to burst, losing consciousness, and he wondered how it could even cause damage with its roar. He loudly announced that they needed to start evacuating everyone. Furia was also badly hurt, but she was conscious. She called out to her master and said that she would buy time with her golem. She created a huge golem, which went to the monster, stopped Adantadel, and dealt a very strong punch. Immediately after that, she lost consciousness, and the golem began to disappear. He began to use magic, thanked her, and said that he would take care of the rest. He turned into a huge dragon made of water, attacked with a powerful stream of water, and destroyed this huge monster. He returned to human form, and the water falling to the ground began to heal all the adventurers who lost consciousness. They came to their senses, began to get up, and asked, is he alive? What happened to his wounds? They looked around and joyfully said loudly that Adantadel is dead. What even happened here? Did anyone see what happened? MC created a stone from water and said he offered a prayer to the spirit stone recently found in the dungeon. It seemed the great spirit of water took pity on him and decided to help and healed them. Naig, surprised, said it was hard to believe, but there was simply no other explanation. Another adventurer, surprised, said it was a true miracle. He saved them all. He approached his comrades, quietly explained what had happened, and thought that thus they had successfully dealt with the threat of Adantadel, and the guild had taken over cleaning the area. They got to know each other better back in the tavern. Later, he left the establishment and said that it seemed the reward issue was resolved. He had received his promised share. Feyru, walking next to him, asked what was going on with Gand. He said with a smile that he felt ill after drinking, that he was lying down and coming to his senses in Furio's mansion. She said that he must have drunk too much at the victory celebration. He said that he still had things to do. Luo and Nuo approached him and said that the master knew and was watching. He called them by name and asked if they were talking about the man who wanted to meet him. They agreed and said that their master was a great man. Later, they reached the outskirts of the city, where there was a hut in the middle of the forest, and he asked if their master lived here. They denied it and said that this was the gate. They would connect to it now. They extended their hands to the door, activated the magic circle, and the door in front of them opened. They all went inside together, where the old man said with a smile that he had been waiting for a long time. It was a pleasure to meet him, the great spirit of water. He called him by his full name and asked, or was it better to call him that? Right, he should also introduce himself. His name is Agatsuma Yukiya. Manaji called him Japanese in surprise, then covered his mouth with his hand and looked back. He said with a smile that they had a lot to discuss. Could they please leave them alone with this guy? Nuo and Luo grabbed Fair and, to her surprise, dragged her towards the exit. He was surprised by this and asked, what does this mean? He clapped his hands, and a table, a chair, as well as tea and various desserts appeared next to them. He said that now they should discuss everything over a cup of tea. He admired this, and with a joyful smile, he asked, is this really so? He was a little confused by this reaction and thought that he was more mischievous than he might seem. He said that means he is also from Japan. He agreed and said that he is a sage of foresight and came to this world about 300 years ago. At first, he couldn't believe everything when he came to this world. He wants to ask him one thing. What year was it in Japan before he came here? He thought about it and said that it was the year 2033. He said with a serious expression that he came to this world when it was 2024 in Japan. The protagonist was surprised by this and asked loudly, what does he mean? He thought that it means that he came to this world around middle age. 9 years have passed in Japan, and as many as 300 here. Yukiya said that this is called spatial time distortion. In this world, time flows faster than in their home world. He understood him and thought that although it still sounds very confusing, he said that even despite this, his surprise cannot be described in words when he reincarnated as a great spirit. He said that of all the reincarnated Japanese, he was certainly the most powerful. He was a little surprised by this and asked if there was anyone else besides them. He agreed and said that he was the third, and he became the fourth. Reincarnated people appear in this world once every few decades, as a person capable of causing key changes. As mentioned, he is a sage of foresight. He can predict various events with his own eyes. His appearance was predicted by him several decades ago. He really wanted to meet him, so he contacted him before meeting in person. A bird appeared next to him, which he immediately remembered, and he said that he wanted to clarify the details. However, this bird is like a smartphone. The further it is, the worse the signal. MC looked at the bird that landed on his shoulder and said that this explained why it was so scary. He thought that although if you look closely the bird is cute. Yukiya, with a slightly worried look, said that he was sorry if it scared him. He denied it and thought that he hadn't heard the word smartphone in a long time. He is definitely a reincarnated person, just like him. The bird disappeared, and he asked, by the way, where are the other reincarnated people now? He said that of the two, one has already died. His name was Takashi Matoba. He became a hero and was admired by many during his life. However, after he founded his own kingdom, Takasura, becoming the first ruler, he said it was amazing, he created an entire country. Then what about the second person? He was a little confused by this question and said that he was enjoying his vacation on a remote island in the south. He would introduce them soon. He thought with a confused look that there was a big gap between them. Yukiya, with a serious expression, said that he still had something to ask him. About the twins, Luo and Nuo. There is a country called Lunacia. Magic is very popular there. In this country, they took care of him 100 years ago. It was a rather calm and nice country. This wording caught his attention, and he said that this country was destroyed 18 years ago. And these two are both surviving princes of Lunacia. An old friend brought them to him. Also, since they had great talent, he raised them and taught them magic. However, the main problem is that they are unable to use magic on their own. Thanks to special properties, when the twins combine magic, they become a powerful single entity. Their magical abilities and mana capacity increase many times over, and only the two of them are currently capable of using such synergy. Manaji said that this is a truly amazing trait. So what did he want to ask of him? He said that he wants him to take the two of them with him. Perhaps his offer was a little harsh, but this can be attributed to the fact that he has long been cut off from society. He said in a slightly confused tone that perhaps that is true. Yukiya raised his hand and said that he sees a future in which he, sir, will establish good connections with many people. By traveling alongside him, they will be able to gain good and invaluable experience and begin to grow as individuals. He stood up from the table, bowed, and said that therefore he asks you to take care of them. He thought with a small smile that he would have to take care of these two. He agreed and said that he would take them under his wing. After all, when he came to this world, he firmly decided that if he had power, he should save and help everyone within his reach. He was glad of this, took him by the hands, thanked him, and said that he had taught them most of the magic he knew. They also had good teaching abilities, so they could teach magic to other children. He also wanted to give him some advice. He should take the traveler who came with him. It would be useful for both of them. It seemed like it was time. At that moment, they entered the house. Luo and Nuo called the master and said that they had returned. Yukiya called them and said that, as he had already said, from now on, they should follow this gentleman. They called the master with a slightly sad look, and he patted their heads and said that they should remember that he had taught them teleportation magic. They could come to him at any time. They happily agreed, turned to him, bowed, and thanked him for it. The protagonist agreed with a smile and said that it was a pleasure to meet them. He turned to Fair and said that now, as for her, the young lady, there must be some reason why she followed him. This caught his attention, and he thought that, however, he did not sense any malicious intentions on her part. She must not be bad. She thought about how to answer, and he said that it was okay if she wanted to go with him. She was very surprised by this, called his name, turned to Nuo and Luo, and said loudly that she would no longer allow them to do whatever they wanted. Yukiya looked at him and thought that the great water spirit was a person with a big heart. He was sure that these qualities of his would attract many people. He thanked him and wished him good luck in the future. After some time, MC pointed to the side and said that from now on, they would travel with them and Fair too. The people around greeted her happily, and she said that she was glad to meet them. The children approached Nuo and Luo and said that they had the same faces and hairstyles too. He called Forio and said that he was very grateful for all the help and support given. She denied it and said that it was a great honor for her to help him. She said that on the contrary, she should thank him for the spirit he gave her. He said that there was no need to thank him. If anything happens, she should tell this girl. He will receive a message and rush over. She waved her hand at him, said goodbye, and he thanked her. Right after that, they went to the next city on carts. At the same time, in a dark basement, someone said loudly that he did it. He caught the black dragon. This dragon was very angry about this and said that they, humans, he would not forgive them and would destroy them all. After some time, Manaji thought that a month had already passed since they left Holfern. He and his companions were approaching the lake, but it was still unknown what awaited them in the city on the border of the country. Now they stopped in the city of Mariol on the border of the country to replenish their strength and supplies before crossing the border. Here they will stay for 10 days. That night, he felt the powerful aura of a dragon, stood up abruptly and noticed that everyone around him was sleeping. He wondered what this feeling was. This is not a person. It seems like the power of a great spirit. Is it calling him? He feels pain and regret. This worries him, but he cannot leave his companions. He began to use magic and thought, great, he has become better at using his power. However, if he leaves his assistant here, then there is no need to worry. He greeted the familiar that appeared, and she responded in kind. He said that her name would be Suiko. She should look after the house while he was away. She agreed with the master, and he began to pass through the window, thanked her, and said that he was counting on her. He went up to the roof, began to look around and wondered, is this coming from that mansion? No, it is underground. He began to descend underground and said that apparently he needs to go even deeper. He continued to descend underground until he hit a magical barrier. He was a little surprised by this and asked what the barrier was doing here. He jumped and broke this barrier upon landing. He went down to the basement, landed and said that he must be in place. He was very surprised when he saw a large dragon that was bound by magical chains. He woke up, looked at it and said that so that's where this enormous power was coming from. He is a great spirit, right? The protagonist agreed, introduced himself, and he said that he was the dark dragon Diazodas and was grateful for coming. He no longer had the strength to break these shackles. Could he fulfill his last wish? He came from a nest called the Abyss of Purgatory. He thought this place was safe. One day while he was hunting, people stole his child, his precious egg. He asked, so did he come here to get it back? He agreed and said that, however, as it turned out, it was a trap. They put a curse on him. He is bound by the dragon sword technique, which deprives him of his strength and he has no choice but to wait for death. That's why he called him. He called him and said that he begs him to save his child. He asks to take him away from the clutches of vile people. He created a small drop of water and said that he can heal him, although not completely, but it should help. He said that it is useless because he is cursed. The fire is devouring him from the inside. Unexpectedly for him, it worked instantly. And MC said that now he is as good as new. Diazodas could not believe it, and he grabbed the magic chain and said that now he will remove the chains. He easily tore out of the ground the support to which the chains were attached. He dusted off his hands and said that now everything is fine, and he was worried. He was very confused by this and thanked this great spirit. He said that now they need to figure out how to escape from here. He followed his call, so he doesn't know where the exit is. He grabbed the hem of his clothes with his teeth and said that now that he is free, it is not a problem. He put him on his back and told him that he should hold on tighter. He released a powerful stream of energy from his mouth, directed it upward, and broke through the ceiling above them. He flew out through the hole, and he called him with a worried look and said loudly that his friends are nearby. He asks him to try not to destroy the city. He looked into the distance and said that he should not worry. His child is in one of the neighboring palaces, and this city does not interest him. He wants to thank him again. He clenched his teeth with anger and thought that he had calmed down a little, but the blood is still pulsing in his veins. If he thoughtlessly bursts into the palace, he will be caught again, but he has no other choice. Manaji said that he would go with him. He said that his comrades were probably worried about him. He said that if he went there alone, nothing good would come of it. Also, if he wanted to save his child, he should accept his help. Diazodas thanked him, and he said that they needed to make it before the sun rose. They flew closer to the castle and he asked, "Are they here?" He agreed in a serious tone and said that he could feel him, that he was in the hands of those damned freaks. If he got closer, they would be noticed. He said that then he could handle it himself and that he should wait for them here. He jumped off his back and he said that he was relying on him. He flew to the castle and thought that he felt a large crowd of people, that the security here was heavy. He turned into a drop and said that in this form, he should not be noticed. He made his way into the castle and thought that he felt an aura similar to his. There was a door ahead, a gate like there was treasure hidden behind it. Once inside, he saw 2 large eggs and said they had equally strong energy. Which one did he need? Okay, there was no point in choosing. He couldn't leave anything for these poachers, so he'd take both. What should he do now? He wouldn't be able to get through the barriers with the children, and guards were patrolling outside. He looked around, walked up to the wall, and attacked with a strong stream of water to break through the wall. The guards noticed this and loudly asked, "What's going on?" Water was pouring out of the treasury. He climbed out of the castle, flew up, and said he apologized for being late. Diazodas thanked him joyfully and said he would definitely repay him. He looked closely at the 2 eggs he had brought and took his child, and the protagonist asked with a confused look. So it's not his? He couldn't leave him there, so he took him with him. He said he did the right thing. Those people didn't know what kind of beast they were taking in. This is Nash's vulnerability, the royal beast, quite loud and willful. He sat on its back, looked closely and asked, I wonder what it would be like? He turned to it and said that he would take it back to his comrades. He agreed and thanked him for it. Later, they stopped in the forest and he said that thanks to him, he gained freedom and got his child back. How can he thank him? He said that while he was sitting on its back, an idea came to him. Could he ask him for a favor? Later, on the street from where they got out, people crowded around and asked what happened here. A flash of magic? Attention everyone, they are currently investigating the cause. They should not get too close to the smoke. MC quietly returned to the house with the egg and mentally apologized for this. A very worried Yona ran up to him and asked the master where he was. He stroked her head, apologized, and said he had to run out of business. Philly came up to them and said, Welcome gentlemen. It seems something had happened in town. She asked in surprise what kind of egg he was holding in his hands. He was a little confused and said he just found it. First they should have breakfast, and then they could discuss everything outside. Later, outside, Feru asked what all the noise was about. Was something being built here? He said in a confused tone that he didn't even know that. There was some unrest in the city, so he suggested leaving a little earlier. He still had a lot of things to do at the lake. He needed to get everything done. He didn't need to worry about the paperwork. Philly asked if he was absolutely sure. It was impossible to cross the border without passes. He said everything would be fine. She could just trust him. She agreed, and he said they should divide the responsibilities to get it done faster. Feru would take care of the provisions. They needed to take supplies for a month. Nuo and Luo would take care of the building materials. Everyone would have housing near the lake. They needed to buy enough resources for 3 large houses. Philly and Yona would buy everyone clothes. She agreed and asked, so what would he do? He said he'd find carpenters and builders, since they were unlikely to be able to build anything reliable on their own. He waved goodbye and wished them all luck. After that, Manaji walked down the street with a thoughtful look, thinking that first he should go to the guild, find someone there who could accompany them to the lake, and also ask about the builders. As he walked further, he sensed some dark energy and thought it was hard to tell in the crowd. He closed his eyes, concentrated, and saw people in prison nearby, calling for help and saying they trusted him. But now, gods, why are they laughing at them like that? They're doomed. They won't survive here. They were enslaved because they were of a different race. He knelt down and wondered, was it underground? Were people really held there? He remembered the past, and while no one was looking, began to descend underground to check it out. Having gotten deep enough, he found himself in an underground tunnel, realized it was a prison, and felt a strong dark energy here. He looked around and thought that most of them were probably criminals. There seemed to be no children in sight. He felt light energy and thought that, as he thought, they were innocent, their energy was pure. An elf sitting behind bars noticed him, loudly called him a great spirit, and asked him to save them. The other prisoners heard this and began to loudly call him for help. The guard of this place came to their screams and loudly ordered them to be silent in a displeased tone. The protagonist approached him, strangled him with water, approached the bars, and said that they should stop making noise so as not to attract the guards. He grabbed the bars and easily pushed them apart, releasing the prisoners from the first room. He went further and met a dwarf behind bars, who said that even if he freed them, they still had nowhere to go. There was no need to worry about them. He stopped next to him and asked, however, if they had such a place, would they want him to free them? He agreed with this and said that, however, there was no need to give them false hope. He became worried about this and said that he hadn't even thought about it. He looked at him with a serious expression and said that there was too much humanity in him for a spirit. Well, he changed his mind. He didn't want to rot in this hole. However, he had no desire to live. The tools, the forge, his homeland, all of it was destroyed. He began to push aside the bars and said that then he could settle near his lake. He would live there with the orphans. He could join them if their homes were destroyed. They could build new ones. They were just about to build a big house, and extra hands wouldn't hurt. The prisoners came out of their cells and started thanking him for saving them. His attention was drawn to the people in another cage. Dark energy was emanating from them, and they said loudly that he should let them out too. He could be useful to them. He knew how to build houses, honestly. The dwarf said that it was better to leave them. They had committed serious crimes. They were outraged by this, started insulting him, and asked him not to believe him. He looked over the last cage and thought that the man was afraid. Among them, only he had a pure heart. He couldn't be left here. Unexpectedly for the prisoners, he squeezed through the bars, approached the man, and asked why he was put here. He hadn't done anything wrong, had he? The boy was surprised to hear this, lowered his head, and said that a man had betrayed him. He had set him up to take his money and his fiancée, even though they had once been friends. He listened to this and thought it was clear that he hadn't managed to completely hate his friend, and it was gnawing at him. He said that he didn't belong here. He helped him up and led him to the exit, and another prisoner loudly asked, "What about them?" As soon as the two of them stepped out, he sent a wave of water at them to push them back and close the bars. To their indignant outrage, he said that he was doing this because they deserved their fate. He couldn't save them, because they were obliged to atone for their sins themselves. When they left the prison, the prisoners thanked him again and said that they were in his debt. As a token of their gratitude, they would build him a magnificent mansion. The other prisoners approached him and asked if he could take them with him too. They promised to try their best. They would definitely repay him for all the kindness he had done for them. MC asked, "Does that mean they all have nowhere to go?" They nodded in agreement, and he said that was clear. Then he would introduce them to his comrades. They were worried about this, but he said that there was no need to be afraid. All these people gathered here for different reasons, but they were good. After that, they met with the others. They were filled with compassion for them and said how hard it had all been for them. They should eat their fill today and get a good night's sleep. He stood to the side and thought with a small smile that everything seemed to have worked out well. Philly came up to him, called him, and said that yesterday's destruction in the city contributed to the spread of harmful gas throughout the city. They said that the merchants, who had foreseen supply disruptions, were preparing to leave the city. He said that was understandable, in which case they needed to finish the remaining shopping quickly. She said that the number of people had increased, so it would be better to decide what to do tomorrow first. He agreed and said that he would go buy essential goods tomorrow then. He went outside and thought that indeed there were far fewer people on the streets than yesterday. Not only people, but also little money was left. His attention was drawn to a girl standing on the street and said that they should take a look here. It was closing soon. They should have time to buy while the prices were low. He came closer. She said hello, and he asked if he could look around first. She agreed. Manaji began to look around and, with a little surprise, thought that there were even magical items here. He noticed a glowing crystal ball and asked what it was and why it was glowing. She was very surprised by this and said that it was a magical artifact that reacted to the presence of spirits. It was a very rare and valuable item. The closer it was to a spirit, the stronger the light became. As soon as she brought it to him, her store was illuminated by a very bright light. She moved the ball away. It dimmed a little. She brought it closer again, and the room was illuminated by a bright light again. He, looking confused, said that the thing was that he was a great spirit. She fell to the ground from shock, and he, confused by this, loudly called out to this girl. Later, she woke up, stood up abruptly, and he said, "She's finally awake." She apologized in a shocked tone and loudly asked, however, what a great spirit was doing in an ordinary store. He said that he apologized for scaring her. He retold her what had happened. She listened, and with a thoughtful look said that if they all moved to the lake, then of course, they would need household goods. Living on self-sufficiency is quite difficult. He agreed and said that getting to the neighboring villages is also quite tiring. She asked, in that case, why doesn't he entrust her with logistics management? The thing is, she was going to close the store. Initially, she thought she would be able to learn trade here. However, now that the city is in such a state, she is thinking of changing location. The protagonist asked if she wants to go with them. She said with a joyful look that it must be fate. He can believe that when she takes on something, she gives it her all. Therefore, she asks to let her accompany him, the Lord of the Great Spirit. In addition, he will have access to all the goods from her store. This is a good offer, he must agree. He thought with a slightly confused look that apparently she is a natural-born merchant. After that, he introduced her to the others and thought that in the end, a merchant named Armisa joined them. After which they left Mariol. As they rode through the forest, Philly, with a slightly worried look, said that they came to the forest on the Lord's instructions, but now they have strayed far from the border. He said everything was fine. He had to meet someone here. She asked if someone else was joining them. He said that wasn't exactly true. They were all very scared when Diasodas flew up to them and said that he was sorry for keeping him waiting. With a shocked expression on her face, asked loudly, "Is this the one they saw above the city recently?" He said that everything was fine, there was no need to worry. He introduced him and said that his child had been kidnapped and he was trying to get it back. He said that he was sorry if he scared his friends. He came to repay the debt for saving him and the child. They looked around and MC said that it looked like everyone had fainted from fear. He attached the cart to it with water and asked, "Well, then they won't be late?" He agreed, flew up and asked if they were shaking too much. He refused and said that he was fine. Yona came up to him and said that she was also okay. He turned to her and said with a little surprise that he thought she had lost consciousness. She said, with a joyful look, that he was a kind dragon. He had kind eyes, so she was not scared. "By the way, is there already someone living in his lake?" He agreed and said that a family of 3 dark elves settled there. A boy named Helio was about her age. They would definitely become friends. She asked if they thought he would want to be friends with her. He confirmed this and said that he was sure of it. Diasodas looked down and asked if this was the same lake. He also looked down, agreed, and she was surprised by the beauty of the place and said that this was the master's lake. He landed next to the lake and said that he kept his promise. They got out of the carriage and Manaji thanked him for his help. He began to take off, said goodbye, and he said that he could contact him if he needed help. He flew off into the distance, and he turned to her and asked if they could wake up the others. She agreed, and together they woke up the rest of his comrades. Etna and Helio came to him, looking shocked and calling out to him. He called them and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he was glad that they were okay. He said loudly that they were also glad that they were safe. They had been waiting for his return so much. Where had he been all this time? He said that it was a long story, and first he would like to introduce them to some people. They were very surprised to meet people, and he said that he would tell them the details later, but they should know one thing. These people were also seeking refuge here. They were all kind and would not harm them. He guaranteed it. The people approached them and said that his name was Gond, and he was here because the master had saved him and his comrades. He was Sans, one of those comrades. He was Phonorix, and the master had freed him from the captivity of slave traders. She is Armissa. She came here to make their life better. The main character said that he would like them to live near the lake too. What will he say about this? Etna turned to him and said with a smile that it was his lake, so it was not for him to decide, but he was still grateful that he asked. Besides, if these were people the master had trusted, then it seemed they would get along and be able to live in peace. They must be very tired after a long journey. He invited them all to his place for tea, and at the same time they would meet his wife. He thanked him for this, and he said with a smile that it was no problem. These people really seemed nice. He was looking forward to getting to know them better. Yona approached his son, introduced herself, and asked, his name was Helio, right? This was her younger brother Luto. Did he want to be friends with them? He immediately agreed with a joyful smile. They walked off together, and she said that she would now introduce him to the others. After this, the residents began spending time together, and the MC thought that everything seemed to be going well for everyone. However, if there were too many people here, they would start attracting monsters. To solve this problem, he placed a barrier of water around the lake and said that it would protect them from anyone who would try to harm them. Etna approached him, called out loudly in a joyful tone, and said that in honor of his return and to welcome everyone else, they were throwing a feast that evening and that he must be present. He turned to him and said that he would help with the preparations. When night fell, they were all carefreely discussing something with each other and sipping drinks from their mugs. Jonah approached him, called out to him, and he turned and asked if she had eaten well. She agreed, noticed Helio, who waved his hand to her, waved back, and he said with a smile that he saw that they got along well. She said in a joyful voice that everyone else had become friends with him too. They agreed that tomorrow they would all go fishing together. By the way, they are allowed to fish in the lake, right? He agreed and said that they only have to be careful and not catch too much. Also, most importantly, they are not allowed to go beyond the barrier. She said that she was very grateful to him for always taking care of them. He laughed and asked what happened. Why such formality? Her gratitude always reached him through their contract. She laughed and said that she just wanted to thank him personally. Manaji turned around and said that she should go see. Helio was already waiting for her. She also noticed him and said that indeed. Then she ran. He felt very tired, went to the lake and thought that it seemed like he overdid it a little. He dived into the water and thought that he needed some sleep. Later, he heard Yona's voice calling him, opened his eyes, and thought that it was already morning. He surfaced with a happy expression on his face, wished her good morning, and said that yesterday was fun. He was surprised that she had become more mature, and she ran to him, hugged him, and loudly said that he was finally awake. He called her name with a confused look, and asked when she had managed to grow so much. She, with tears of joy on her face, said that it was not surprising, because 3 years had already passed. He was even more surprised by this and asked, did he seriously sleep for 3 whole years? She agreed and said that he was gone so often, but not for such a long time. She was already starting to worry that something had happened. He asked for forgiveness, and she said that he suffered so much for them that he was probably very tired. The protagonist thought that if he thought about it, after she summoned him, he managed to fight huge monsters and healed many people. This probably took a lot of strength, and the barrier over the lake was the last straw. She said that, however, she always believed that he would return one day. Welcome. He smiled and said that he was very glad that everything was fine with her. He thought that before, she was about waist high to him. Children grow very quickly. Yona said with a happy look that she wanted to show him something. He should follow her. But before that, he should close his eyes. He did it, took her hand so that she would lead him to the right place and asked, what is there? Later, she led him to a large house, allowed him to open his eyes and said that this was his new home. He was very surprised by what he saw and asked loudly, is this palace his home? He thought that it was many times bigger than his parents' house. He said with surprise that such a mansion for him alone was already too much. She said with a small smile that she knew it was too much for him, but they all wanted to create a home for the master to return to. He thanked her and said that he was really very grateful for it. She led him inside and said that now they should see what was inside. He followed her, apologized for the intrusion, but remembered that this was his home and asked, would it be more correct to say he returned? He was surprised by what he saw inside, and she said with a smile that the dwarves worked very hard when they built all this. He continued to look around and said that he would need to thank them later. He saw the egg, which was intact, and said that he was sorry for leaving it for 3 years. He thought it was so exciting. It was good that it was okay. Yona said that they all took turns warming this egg every day and talking to it. MC thanked her and said that they all helped him out a lot. She said that it wasn't hard. Everyone lived here together and helped each other. He noticed that the barrier seemed to be fine and asked, no one was hurt by the monsters, right? She said that everything was fine. Philly and the others neutralized them, and Suiko took care of them. He was surprised by this, after which she appeared next to them, wished the creator a good morning, and said that they were waiting for him to wake up. He said that he was sorry for putting so much on her. She said that it was nothing to worry about, because everything was under the mistress's control. It was she who asked her to protect the people at the lake. Yona said with a joyful look that she really did it. He was very surprised by this, and thought that they made a contract with her, but the fact that she was able to summon a higher spirit and use magic to such an extent to make requests is only her merit. She grew up and began to look a little more mature, but it seems that inside she has grown even more. He noticed some noise outside, and she went to the door and asked if everyone had already gathered. Several comrades came to him, who joyfully said loudly that they had not seen each other for a long time. He finally woke up. They were impatiently waiting for him to wake up. He was a little confused because of this, and said that they really had not seen each other for a long time. He apologizes for suddenly disappearing. Philly asked him not to worry, and said that she was glad that he woke up safely. They said that today they would throw a feast in honor of the master's awakening, so they would see each other later. They went about their business. He waved them goodbye and asked when everyone had managed to get together. Yona said that, to be honest, they crossed paths with the others on the way here. They said they wanted to surprise the master, so they arrived late. Can we invite the other children? Everyone missed him very much. Manaji agreed with a smile and said that he was looking forward to it. Later, a lot of people gathered at the feast, and Etna, looking very happy, loudly told the master that they had not seen each other for a long time. He sat in front of him at the table and said that he was grateful that he had organized the feast again. Didn't he think that everything had become much more luxurious? He said that in fact, the dark elves who had recently arrived in this area helped with the farming. In particular, this year they had had an excellent harvest. He looked around and said that indeed, there were more people and he hadn't even noticed it. He bowed and said that he apologized for not consulting him. He asked him not to worry about it and said that this barrier protection does not allow evil forces to penetrate, so bad people will not be able to get here. If everyone who lives here does not mind, then he has no objections. He was very happy about this, thanked him, and with tears of happiness said that he was so generous. A dark elf approached them, brought a plate of food, apologized for interrupting them, and said that she hoped that he would like it. The protagonist tried this dish, agreed, and said that it was very tasty. Especially the vegetables were very fresh. She said in a joyful tone that if there is an opportunity, next time he should look at their fields. A dwarf named Gerd approached them and said that then he should look into their forge as well. He called the master and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. He thanked him and said that he had heard that he and the others had built him a house. He said that there was no need for thanks. They had promised. He thought with a small smile that they had built many houses since then. The dwarves truly were an amazing people. Etna, with a joyful expression on his face, said that he was being modest as usual, but thanks to him, this place could now be called a real city without any exaggeration. He said that he was looking forward to tomorrow, so he could see it with his own eyes. He was glad that everyone was happy, and the next day, he went outside and greeted the people working in the fields. Yona met him, waved her hand and called him here. He followed her, examined the grounds and said that it was incredible. This was a real city. Armisa met them, called the master and said, "Welcome." She pointed her hands towards the building nearby, and he looked at it and asked, "Is this her store?" She happily agreed and said that they bought materials from defeated monsters, as well as vegetables from the fields, from Philly and others, and used them to trade with nearby villages. Thanks to this, their store has a huge selection of goods. He looked around and said that, indeed, it seemed like everyone's life had gotten much better. She said that she also enjoyed trading. She could only be grateful. Moreover, the monsters living in this forest are of a fairly high rank, and their materials sell for a high price. He said that was good. They were now heading to the forge. She asked them to be careful, after which the two of them came to the forge, where Gerd was already working. Yona called him, waved her hand, and he followed her and apologized for disturbing her. He turned to them, called out and said that he was grateful that they had come. MC said that he had taken him up on his offer. He built an excellent forge. He said with a joyful look that he himself had said that one can do whatever one wants. Here's a sword made there. He asks to look at it. He took it in his hands and said that it was a beautiful blade, skillful work. He thanked him for the praise and said that there were quite a lot of minerals in this area. When they started cultivating the land, they found mithril, so they made a sword. He was very surprised by what he heard, and Gerd said that he had one request for him. He wanted him to bless this sword. He thought that great spirits could bless what was connected to him. Mithril was mined on his territory, so it could be blessed. He began to use magic on this sword. The dwarves were very surprised by this, and he said that now it had become a spiritual sword. It is one of the 10 greatest weapons in this world. Only those recognized by the Great Spirit can use it. Manaji called Yon and said that she should try to take it. She agreed, took the sword, and a large amount of water appeared around her. She was amazed by the beauty of this magic, but she felt dizzy. He caught her and asked if maybe she needed to practice first. She agreed with a tired look, but at that very moment, someone burst into the workshop and loudly called the master. Gerd was indignant about this, loudly called Luto and said that he had warned him about knocking first. He apologized for this, approached him, and loudly said that it was simply very important. Someone calling himself the dragon's messenger passed beyond the barrier. He wanted to meet him. He immediately came to the right place, and the messenger said that they were seeing each other for the first time. They must be the great spirit of water. He agreed and asked, he must be the messenger from the dragon village? He agreed and said that his name was Danif. He came to express the last will of the Black Lord Diazodas. The protagonist was shocked by what he heard and asked what he was talking about. He lowered his head sadly, and he said that they could talk at his house. He doesn't mind, does he? He took the basket he had brought with him and agreed to his proposal. They came into the hall, sat opposite each other, and he asked what had happened. He said that after he had saved the Lord, he had taken refuge in the eternal darkness, not far from their village. His current environment was dangerous, so he lived near them. However, one day, a man came to their village, calling himself a messenger from the kingdom of Luginus. He declared that Lord Diazodas was an evil that must be eradicated, and ordered them to show him the way to his lair. Naturally, they refused, and he left empty-handed. However, he came again, this time with an army, and attacked their village. He considered them barbarians who glorified evil. At first, the dragon warriors managed to hold back the army's onslaught, but then heroes from the kingdom of Luginus appeared, and their situation worsened. When the village was almost destroyed, the Lord intervened and was able to drive these people away. However, he said that it was too early to rejoice. There was a high probability that people would return with renewed vigor. He would destroy these stupid people and protect them. The villagers wanted to dissuade him because it was too dangerous, and he said that he knew what he was doing, so he asked them for only one thing. If he did not return, they should take his heir and take him to the spirit of water. He would be able to protect him and all of them. Together they would be safe. His child Bargius must survive. Danif said that this was his last word. His life had been taken by that brutal battle. The dragon in the basket made a sound. He turned around and asked, was he already awake? MC began to guess, and he said that this was the heir of Lord Diazodas named Bargius. He climbed out of the basket, landed on his feet, and sniffed his hand. He rubbed against his hand. He immediately remembered Diazodas and asked, what about his body? He said that they buried him with all due respect. He said with a slightly sad smile that he was grateful to them for being with him during his life and at the moment of farewell. He promises to take care of his child. The lake is always open to the residents of their village. He bowed to him and thanked him loudly for this, and said that he was also grateful that he would take care of the master. After that, Danif went back, and he turned to the dragon and said that he was glad to meet him. He would try to raise him to be as great a dragon as Diazodas was. A week later, the children were playing with him, but his attention was drawn to Manaji, who called him by name and asked if he was playing with children. Bargius made a joyful sound, and he said that it was time for them to go hunting. They went into the forest, and he thought that, every day he hunted, he was getting stronger. On the way to the forest, they noticed a slime emerging from the forest, and he asked if he would go with them. He thought that this slime had joined them after another hunting trip. It cleans up the remains of the dragon's prey. It is also very cute and docile. He flew up to it, bit the slime, and the slime was confused by this, and asked him not to do it. They went further and met a hippogriff in the forest. The monster noticed them, flew towards them, and let out a very loud roar. However, when this monster flew up to them, Bargius flew up to him and they collided heads in the air. He let out a loud roar again, and he felt worse. He closed his eyes and let out a displeased cry. He was worried about this and thought that the hippogriff's cry had a paralyzing effect. However, he was confident that he could handle it. The slime pointed a tentacle in his direction, and he stroked it, and said that he would be fine. There was no need to worry. In a critical situation, they would come to his aid. However, at that very moment, the hippogriff pinned him to the ground with a very strong blow and let out another loud roar. The protagonist raised his hand and thought that it was still too early for him to fight such enemies. However, just as he was about to do something, he was engulfed in dark energy, and he asked, is this the dark space? Could this really be Bargius's doing? He thought that such was the power of the black dragons. He felt his presence everywhere. The slime trembled with fear, and he stroked it and thought with a worried look that the darkness that rejected all light, he couldn't even see himself here. No wonder he was afraid. When the black space ended, they saw Bargius sitting in front of the defeated hippogriff. He turned to them, made a strangled sound, and then fell to the ground due to his wounds. He immediately ran to him, used his magic, and instantly healed him. They were both happy about it, and he said that he was as good as new now. Is he hungry? I think it's time for them to eat. Everyone agrees, right? He made a sound in agreement, and the slime began to nod. His attention was caught by someone nearby saying that they didn't expect to meet him in such a place. He turned around, saw Nuo and Luo, and said that it had been so long since he had seen them. They said that they were also glad to see him. He said that he hadn't seen them at the festival. Where had they been? They said that they had been helping the teacher with magical research and had left the lake for a while. MC asked, so the research was complete? They said that wasn't quite true. The teacher wanted to meet him. He looked a little confused and said that maybe he would visit him in a few days. They started using magic and said that he wanted to see him right now. He became even more confused because of this and said loudly that they should let him at least prepare a little. They didn't listen. He teleported to Yukiya's house and greeted him. He said that his students were very disrespectful to him. As he saw, he did warn them that they were supposed to transport him here at a time convenient for him. He asked, so what did he want from him? He said that there was someone who wanted to meet him. The guy sitting on the couch next to him said that he proposed to postpone these complicated explanations and tell him directly. He was Hiroaki Muto, just like them. He was from Japan. He was surprised by this and asked loudly, did he say that so simply? He came closer, extended his hand to him and said that he could call him by his name. He was glad to meet him. Managi shook his hand, introduced himself, and said that he could address him as he felt comfortable. He felt something strange, called him, and asked if he was not human. He said with a smile that, as expected from the Great Spirit, he quickly noticed. Now he has taken the form of a human, but in fact, he is a sacred dragon. He was surprised by this, heard a sound, noticed Bargus and asked if he was teleported along with him. This also attracted his attention, and he said that this is the heir of the Dragon of Darkness, Diasodas. Muto asked with a smile, so this is his son, right? He asked, so they knew each other? He agreed and said that he owes him a lot. He is sure that he also crossed paths with him. How big he has become. He plucked up his resolve, called him and said that he must not know this, but Diasodas is no longer with them. He was very surprised by what he heard, grabbed him by the shoulders and asked loudly, so he died? However, this simply cannot be. He said with a sad look that, unfortunately, it is true. The representative of the Dragon Village himself told him this news. He also asked him to take care of his heir. He asked with a worried look if he knew what happened then. He agreed and promised to tell him. He listened to the story and said that it was just a nightmare. Why did the kingdom of Luginas suddenly do this? Yukiya said that this is not the kingdom's entire plan. They want to go to war against the ancient dragons. Something must have happened when the treasury in the palace was attacked after the collapse of the mansion in Marior, a trading town on the border. Judging by eyewitnesses, it was the work of the Dragon of Darkness. That's why they came to kill Diasodas. Since the hero fell in that battle, it seems they are trying to shift the blame to the Dragon Village, which protected the Dragon of Darkness. The protagonist said that, however, the collapse of the mansion and the attack on the treasury were the work of the people themselves. The kingdom of Luginas originally stole his egg, and it was they who used the forbidden spell to seal it. None of the dragons did anything wrong. Yukiya said that he was right, but it was not that simple. The forbidden spell is beyond the power of humans. Only demons can cast it. They were probably the ones who ruled the kingdom. He thought that demons were a race of beings who drew their powers from the darkness. They were punished for plotting against the deities. Demons held a grudge against the gods and now work behind the scenes, using other races to gain power. Basically, they are the enemies of this world. Muto was very angry about this and asked, are they implying that humans aren't to blame at all? Even if this was all the work of demons, it was humans who took the dragon's life. They went to war against them, and they were obliged to put them in their place. MC called him and said that he, too, couldn't turn a blind eye to what was happening. If misfortune befell the village of dragons who mourned the death of Diasodas, he couldn't help but intervene. After all, he himself promised to help them in their time of need. He calmed down a bit and asked with a smile, so that means he'll help him? He agreed and said that if they take revenge on the people, they will cause irreparable damage to the kingdom. However, he does not want innocent citizens to suffer. Yukiya agreed with him and said that the people are not to blame for the actions of the authorities and the actions of the hero. That is why he wants to ask the two of them for help. They must go to the Dragon Village and protect the residents from the kingdom's attack. Muto said that since they want a peaceful solution, so be it. Managi said that he will also go to the village to help the residents. He thanked them and said that for now he will look for traces of demons. As soon as he finds out something, he will immediately inform them. He turned to him, called out, and said that he had completely lost his mind. He also wanted to drag him into a fight that he had nothing to do with. Indeed, his power helped in this battle, but he does not want to force him into this and asks for forgiveness. He said that he is in the wrong in this, since he's responsible for Bargus, or rather, since he met Diasodas, he's developed a connection with the Dragon Village. Besides, he would have helped him anyway. After all, he also wants to protect his homeland and legacy. He was surprised by this, then smiled and said that Yukiya said he was a kind guy, but he never thought he was that kind. He's grateful to him and relies on him, the great water spirit. Later, Muto transformed into a dragon. They flew high in the sky, and he said loudly that he was grateful that he decided to give him a ride. He said with a smile that there was no need for thanks. Now the next stop is the Dragon Village. He looked at Bargus flying next to him and said that he would like to leave it in the village too, since they would have to engage in battle. Later, They flew to his village. He retold what happened and said that this is why he was heading to the dragon village. Naturally, they are not obliged to participate in the defense of someone else's village. He just wanted to share that he would be away from the village for a while. Yona stepped forward, called the master, and said that she asked to be taken with him. She was already better with the Zanpakuto and could fight. She asked to be allowed to protect him in this battle. He patted her head and said that he saw how she was growing day by day, both physically and spiritually. She wanted to say something, and he said that, however, she could help him in another way. He wanted her to protect the village during his absence. Deal? She clenched her hands into fists, agreed, and said that she promised to stand guard over the village and wait for his return. After that, they flew to the dragon village and Muto asked, "This is Yona, right? She was a good child." The protagonist agreed and said that that's why they wanted to keep her away from the battlefield. Bargius was the same way. He flew up to him, sat on his shoulder, and he said with a smile that he understood him. He thought that from his words, Bargius was also worried about the safety of his homeland. Although it was safer to leave him with the others, he respected his desire to protect his home. In return, he asked him not to participate in the battle and to behave quietly. He looked at him with a smile and said that he should remember his promise. He made sounds with a happy look, and he asked, did he just call him Dad? Muto said that he really just called him Dad and said that he remembered it. He looked ahead and said that they should look there. They were almost there. When they landed, an old dragon came to them and said, "Welcome, dear messengers." He, the elder of this village, Loyas, he named them all, and MC said that he was glad to meet him. He bowed and said that they were glad to see him in good health. Bargius flew up to him, made a sound, and he looked at him and respectfully said that as he saw, he had grown up and was still as energetic. He called the elder and said that they had not come here with good news. They told him about it, and he said that they had come here to protect them, and words cannot express their gratitude. According to intelligence reports, the enemy army would arrive in a few days. Managi said that, if so, before the battle, he wanted Bargius to see Diazodas. Loyas said that this gentleman rested in the temple of the Dark Dragon, and he would lead them there. He thanked him for this, and then they came to a large dragon statue. Muto placed his hand on the tablet and told his old friend that he could sleep peacefully. He deserved such an honor. Bargius laid his head on the monument and began to cry and make sounds. After them, he approached the monument, touched the tablet, and said that he would so much like to meet him again. He could sleep peacefully. He promised to protect this village and his heir. He felt the spirit Diasodas touch his head, thanked him for it, and called him his dear friend. Muto called him and said that they could look around the cave where he used to live. He turned to him, agreed, and said that Bargius seemed to want to go there too. They came to the right place, and he said that it was somewhere at the bottom of this hole. Together, they jumped to the bottom of a deep pit, where they found a cave. They went inside. He began to look around and asked, so this is where he lived. He felt something, tensed up because of it, and asked, what was that just now? Was someone left inside? He went deeper into the cave and someone sitting there asked who disturbed his peace. The protagonist introduced himself as the Great Spirit of Water, gave his name and asked, and he must be a great spirit too? The guy agreed and said that he was the Great Spirit of Darkness, Formus, and this was his home. What brought him here? He approached him and said that a dragon who was his friend once lived here. But not long ago, he passed away. He wanted to see the place where he spent his last years, so he came here. Muto called him and asked if someone was here. He turned to him and said that yes, there was. He turned back sharply when Formus said that, although he was a spirit, he was not at all like him. He would remember him, the Great Spirit of Water. He dissolved into the darkness, and he came out of the cave and said that he had spoken with the Great Spirit of Darkness, but he had just left. He was very surprised by this and asked loudly, is this true? He would like to see him too. MC said with a small smile that he had said that he didn't look like a spirit at all. He laughed about it and said that in some ways he was even right. They headed out and he thought, a great spirit of darkness, right? He hoped that they would meet again someday. The remaining days passed peacefully in the company of the villagers. Half-dragons are very friendly and calm people. They live peacefully, far from conflicts, without harming anyone. Over these few days, his desire to protect this land and its inhabitants only grew stronger. Muto approached him, called him, and he calmly agreed and said that the army was approaching. He sat down next to him and asked, this is his first fight against people. Is he sure he's okay? He agreed and said that although he had fought before, it was only in self-defense, but he had never killed anyone. However, this time there was no way to avoid this fight, and if demons were really involved, he would have to fight seriously. By the way, is he okay? He was surprised by this, looked at his hand, and said that it wasn't as kind as him, and that his humanity was slowly fading. Although it wasn't surprising, since he had been reborn and his consciousness had changed significantly. However, communicating with him and Yukiya still reminds him that he is also human. He lightly elbowed him in the side with a smile and said that this is why he wants to end this battle quickly and find the real culprits. Managi understood him and thought that by dealing with the demons, they could extinguish the flames of conflict. A half-dragon ran up to them, loudly called out to them both, and said that the kingdom's army was approaching. After that, they arrived at the Creole Plains, and Muto loudly said that an army of 20,000 people was quite a serious approach. However, the village had 200 knights and less than 300 soldiers. He thought that although the village's army was smaller, the strength of the half-dragon knights was in many ways superior to ordinary people. However, if people with the hero class came to this fight, that would be different. They could easily deal with the knights. He looked straight ahead with a serious expression and said there were 5. The half-dragon didn't understand him, and he said there were only 5 people with particularly powerful abilities. Could they be heroes? Muto noticed something and said it seemed they had made their move. A huge magic circle appeared high in the air, thanks to which a huge creature with fiery swords appeared. They were surprised by what they saw and loudly asked, "What the hell is that?" The protagonists said that since they were able to summon such a creature, they were dealing with a powerful magic caster. He calmly repelled the creature's attack with water and said that, however, he would not let it take a single step further. Muto said with a smirk that it was his turn now. He turned to him and asked him to be careful. He flew up, began to transform into a dragon, released a powerful stream of energy from his mouth, and a huge explosion occurred. He was surprised by this and said with admiration that if they continued in the same spirit, they would be able to defeat them. Suddenly, a teleporter appeared behind him, from which a hand with a dagger emerged and stabbed him in the throat. The half-dragons were very worried about this and warned the others about the enemy attack, and one of them loudly said that he should hold on. Healers would arrive very soon. The teleporter appeared again. The man was about to attack him from a blind spot, but MC caught him in the act of attack. He pulled the man through the teleporter, used water to suffocate him, and the worried half-dragon called out to him and asked if he was okay. He calmly said that he apologized for unnecessary alarm. His goal was to capture this assassin. He bound him with water, and he asked how he managed to get to them in the first place. He said that an ordinary person could not do something like this. Without a doubt, this is one of the heroes. He would need to interrogate him, which was why he was eager to capture him alive. He understood him and said that they would take him into custody and guard him as a prisoner. He thanked him for this, took off, and said that he would go to the enemy camp to help Muto, a position he entrusted to them. At the same time, he delivered a very strong punch, but the man blocked it with his axe and, with a tense look, loudly insulted him. He smirked, stretching his neck, and asked if this was really enough to drive the so-called heroes into a corner. The man assumed a fighting stance and smirked, saying that he could revel in his arrogance while he still could. A girl ran up behind him and agreed with this. He spun around sharply, delivered an elbow strike, but she dodged and loudly said that he was completely open. The heroes ran towards him from different directions, swinging their weapons to strike. He easily caught the blade of his axe, swung his leg, and knocked the sword out of the second hero's hands. The sword sank into the ground next to the girl, frightening her, and Muto, smirking, asked loudly, "Is this all they can do?" Manaji looked at what was happening and thought that he could easily handle the 3 heroes alone. He would take on the last one, the one with the most ominous aura. He landed in a ruined camp and asked if this was the result of his recent breath attack. There were no signs of human presence, except for that place. Inside, the girl was packing her things and said in a very worried tone that things were very bad. No one had warned her about this. He entered and asked if she was going to run away. She loudly agreed and said that it never even occurred to her that someone could crush her summoned monster with one blow. He began to use water and wondered if she took him for an ally. Then, since such an opportunity arose, he tried to attack her, but she was protected by a magical shield and asked in a worried tone, who else was he? He said with a serious expression that he was her enemy. If she surrendered voluntarily, he would not resort to cruel measures. She began to use magic and loudly said that this was a lie. She would not believe it. Ursham Maramintar must answer her call. The Minotaur struck a strong blow with his fist, but he calmly stood in front of him, stopped the attack with water, counterattacked, and said that now he would not move. She summoned another monster, who began to use water magic on him, and she loudly ordered the decisive blow. The monster tried to bite him, but he easily stopped it, killed it with his magic, and said that water was useless against him. She was even more scared because of this, could not believe it, and loudly asked why nothing works. The protagonist walked towards her and asked, has she finally realized she must stop her futile resistance? She summoned several more monsters and, in a frightened tone, loudly said that they must listen to her, and ordered to kill him immediately. At the same time, the 3 other heroes loudly asked in a worried tone, who the hell is he? Why couldn't even the 3 of them defeat him? Muto, smirking, stretched his shoulders and said that it turned out that this was the limit of so-called heroes. The girl jumped towards him, swung her fist, and loudly said that he shouldn't get cocky. He calmly took a breath and said that it was time to finish. He struck incredibly quickly, and with this one attack, killed her before the attack. The other heroes became worried about this and loudly said that Thrasius's death would not be in vain. Go ahead, this was their chance. They simultaneously began to attack with their abilities, which caused a large cloud of dust to rise, and they considered that they had succeeded. However, at that very moment, he jumped to the side, attacked with his breathing technique, killed them, and said that he was finished. He stretched his back and said that it looked like he was fighting someone too. His opponent was quite strong, but should he interfere? At the same time, MC dodged the monster's quick fist attacks, attacked with his magic, but the monster stopped his attack, opened its mouth, and began to drink the water it was creating. At that very moment, another monster behind him began to spit at him, and he turned around and thought it was hydra poison. He created a large amount of water around himself to defend himself, and thought that there was not a single gap in their defense. Against something like this, his usual techniques were useless. How should he deal with this? He found himself in the subconscious, saw a book that was bound with chains, and he thought that it was a book. He felt a colossal power hidden in it. Here, he invariably found the answers he was looking for. However, no matter how you look at the situation, the book in front of him is shrouded in seals. It's impossible, it's forbidden, only if he wants to turn the tide of the battle. He touched the book, gained a new ability, and the heroine watched the battle from the sidelines and said he was powerless against something like that. However, she was terrified when he began to transform his body and said it was a forbidden spiritual technique. He surrounded the area around himself and the monsters with a barrier and used the technique Mist Destruction Area. The girl was shocked when all her monsters disappeared and asked in a shocked tone, "What just happened?" She lost consciousness, fell to the ground, and he went to her and asked, "Did she lose consciousness?" He fell to the ground, not having the strength to maintain his human form, and thinking that he himself had expended too much power. A technique capable of turning a target into fog and completely erasing it from existence. The area of foggy destruction is a power that is frightening to the point of shivers, because he did not even feel that he took someone's life. He protected the effect of this technique with a water barrier to prevent it from spreading. However, something tells him that if he were in this fog, he himself would not have escaped serious damage. He crawled to her and said that he still had questions for her, so she cannot die. After some time, she began to come to her senses, and he and Muto stood next to her and said that it was clear, meaning the prisoner had ended his life. It's a pity. He wanted to get information about demons from him. Unfortunately, nothing can be done. According to the dragon men, everything happened instantly. They didn't have time to react. He looked at her and said that she finally woke up. Who do they have here? Manaji said it was the hero who summoned the fire giant. Ever since her last attack, he had a vague suspicion about her. Outrageous magical power, surpassing human capabilities, and then there were those horns. He couldn't think of anything that simple, so he trusted his intuition. Muto sat in front of her, and with a serious expression, said that this was almost certainly the demon Yukiya warned him about. He turned to him and asked if they would kill her. Dragging her to the village like this was extremely dangerous. She was very worried about this, tried to say something, and he said that he knew he would say that. He removed the water from her mouth, and she loudly said that she was begging him not to kill her. He was a demon. She would tell them everything she knew. She was just asking for mercy. However, at that very moment, her eyes began to move wildly in different directions. Blood began to flow from her eyes and mouth, and she screamed loudly in pain. They were both surprised by this, and the protagonist ran to her with a worried look. He gave her the magical water to drink, instantly healed her, and breathed a sigh of relief when he managed to do it. Muto asked, but was it worth saving her? What if it was just a clever trick? He turned to him and said with a smile that he was simply acting somehow mechanically. Besides, he couldn't be fooled by lies. He said that he himself was barely standing on his feet, but he still acted without hesitation. He said with a serious expression that one should not take him for a naive simpleton. If she was dangerous when she woke up, he would deal with her himself. A dragon approached them and said that something was still wrong here. The first prisoner also suddenly began convulsing and died, just like her. He looked at her and said that perhaps a spell of silence had been cast on them then. It was unlikely that someone who begged for mercy would willingly take poison. Later, they returned to the dragon village. MC met with Bargis and said that he had returned. He flew up to him with a joyful look, hugged him, and thought that the war with the kingdom of Luginas was ended in just 5 hours, thanks to their joint efforts. The enemy lost their heroes and was forced to retreat. While the dragon men did not have a single loss, it was an unconditional victory for their village. What happened made him truly realize how merciless and cruel demons are. They sacrifice even their own kind without a shadow of a doubt. This victory is just a brief episode in a long confrontation with the demons. The battles will continue for a very long time. For now, he wants to bask in the joy that they were able to protect the Dragon Men village. He wants to allow himself to dissolve completely in this beautiful and warm feeling. After some time, he thought that several weeks had already passed since their victory over Luginas. He gave in to the persuasion of Muto and the locals and stayed in the village until he regained his strength. He contacted Yukiya, and now they are waiting for his answer. The demon at this time came to her senses, was with them, drew a picture, called her sister, and said that she should see how beautifully she drew. A dragon human sat next to her, who said with a smile that it was incredible. She had real talent. He approached him, looked at her, and said that she had been acting like this since the moment she woke up. Manaji agreed, and thought that her name was Mashras. He thought she was about the same age as he was before his reincarnation, but after regaining consciousness, she began to act like a small child. It seems her memory ends at the age of 8. Perhaps this is a side effect of the silencing spell. Muto said that he received messages from Yukiya. They need to discuss a lot. He should also bring the demoness with him. She also expressed hope that he would join them. How is he feeling? He hid the fact that his body was still not fully recovered and said that he was fine. Sometime later, they came to the sage's home and he said that they both coped well with such an important task. He is grateful to fate that they are safe and sound. He also understands that this is Mashras. A girl named Sena asked him for forgiveness and said that only next to her, the one who cares for her, does she feel calm. He called her by name and said that if her presence gave her peace, then she could stay with her. She agreed, and he said that judging by his senses of her essence, she is not a purebred demon. Most likely, she is a half-breed, half-human, half-demon. As proof of this, she still has residual traces of the curse that forces her to learn summoning magic against her will, which is only possible for demons, contrary to her human half. The protagonist asked, he says she was forced? Yukiya said that such spells caused her unbearable pain and stress. They even implanted a false personality in her so that she could endure it. However, thanks to his healing, these bonds dissipated, and her soul returned to its true form. Muto asked why then her mind reverted to that of a child. She also gets terribly scared when she sees one of the two of them. He said that their aura is too strong. In her eyes, their power was akin to demonic, and this terrified her. Her returned consciousness encountered painful memories, and, escaping, her mind retreated to childhood. This is a likely explanation for what happened. Judging by her behavior, the demons suppressed her through fear and intimidation. It is truly disgusting to do such evil to one of their own. MC thought that despite her ability to summon such powerful beings, she herself looked cornered. Maybe she understood that if she lost, death awaited her. Muto asked, by the way, is there any news on Luginas? He said that he assigned this to someone. Yukiya said it was regarding his informant. He suddenly stopped responding to communication, and then he realized that things were clearly foul. So he decided to personally go to the kingdom. He sensed dark magical power, and a soldier noticed him and loudly asked who he was. They must capture this suspicious stranger. He examined them and said that it turned out that the demons had brainwashed them, and now he would free them. He struck the ground with his staff, releasing a powerful energy that engulfed the entire city. He thought that by the time he had spread the cleansing spell throughout the kingdom, the faint demonic presence he had sensed had disappeared, so they weren't planning on engaging him in direct confrontation. Or had they already done everything they had planned? Traces of demonic interference reached the heights of power, and even the king and nobles had fallen victim to them. Now, he said, further investigation had revealed something else. The number of missing spirit mages was alarmingly high. There was also ample evidence of secret slave trafficking to an unknown destination. It was safe to say that demons were behind all of this. Manaji wondered, spirit mages and slaves, what were they planning? Muto said it was obvious they were plotting something, but the death of their dragon ally was a serious matter. He intended to meet with the Dragon King and report everything to him personally. Yukiya said that if demons were involved, the Dragon King would not stand idly by. Then, perhaps, the half-dragon's intervention would also be inevitable. He asked him to restrain his anger. He promised to try to do so, and he said that he would discreetly warn his people around the world. If he could, he must enlist the support of the Great Spirits. He wanted to talk about this. Formus remembered, and thought that judging by the Great Spirit of Darkness's behavior, it wasn't so much that he was neutral. It was as if he didn't care about human lives at all. However, he had never even met other Great Spirits. Wait. Now was not the time to worry about that. He said he would do his best. He thanked him, and the protagonist remembered something and said that he had completely forgotten something. He took out several books, and he noticed this, and asked if these were really the same magical tomes he had talked about. To summon a monster of such power, her body and mind must have cracked under the monstrous pressure. He called Mashris, and said that it would be better for her to stay and live here. A quiet, peaceful place would be perfect to the deep-rooted dark magic in her body and heal her mental wounds. He stroked her head and said that she had had to endure so much suffering so far. Everything will be fine now. She can relax. She started crying and agreed, and Sena said it was amazing, as expected of a sage. Even this child thawed in front of him. He laughed and said she could believe it. He had taught much more restless students. MC thought that with him she had a chance to rediscover her former self. He said that since everything had more or less calmed down, he would return to his lake, and Mashras trusted him. After some time, they returned to the city, and he asked in surprise if it was his imagination or if the city had somehow grown. After all, he had been gone for a little over a month. Luto and Yona ran to him from the forest, loudly calling him and saying, "Welcome back." He called them joyfully. She remembered something, wanted to say, but he said it was amazing. In his absence, the city seemed to blossom with new buildings. She agreed and said that their population had increased. She looked to the side and said that they should approach them and say hello. Several worried people crawled out of the forest. One of them called out to the master and said that she apologized for such a sudden appearance. They were a tribe of Lamias. He looked at them and thought that because of the snake-like lower body, they are often mistaken for monsters. Their people had been persecuted for centuries, like the Dark Elves. She said that they came seeking protection. They will serve him with the utmost devotion. She asked to accept them. Manaji thought that he did not sense any evil intentions in them. They can be accepted. He said with a small smile, welcome, but they should not worship him. They can live and work together with the rest of the inhabitants. The main thing is that there is peace and understanding between them. They were very happy about this, bowed. She loudly agreed and said that they were grateful to him from the bottom of their hearts. He looked at them and thought that after all the hardships they had endured, he hoped that this place would be the beginning of a peaceful and happy life for them. Gerd approached him, called for the master, and said that he asked to allow the next arrivals to introduce themselves to him. He turned to him and asked who was with him. He said that he had met them in a country where many dwarves lived. Inspired by their story, they decided to join them. One of them stepped forward and said that they would like to welcome him on behalf of all the new arrivals. Would he allow them to settle in this city? He calmly agreed, and he handed him a sword wrapped in cloth and said that he asked him to accept this gift as a sign of their good intentions. He took the sword out of the cloth. Luto admired the beauty of this sword, and the dwarf said that it was the fruit of the painstaking labor of the new residents, a masterpiece created with special diligence. The protagonist noticed him standing nearby, admiring the sword, and asked if he wanted to hold it. He agreed, took the sword, and looked at it with a joyful expression. He called Gorsus and asked if it would be okay if he handed it over to him. He said that the sword belonged to him. He could do with it as he saw fit. He leaned towards him and said that until he mastered the art of the sword, it would remain with him. Luto, with a joyful expression on his face, thanked him and said that he would try hard. Yona patted him on the head and told him to keep it up. He thought that, by the way, now that their settlement had expanded to the size of a city, it was necessary to expand the protective magical barrier, and after that, he called the two of them and asked if they saw Philly and the others to bring them to his house, okay? After some time, when the people gathered in the hall of his house, she said that they were so glad that he had returned safely. They were told that he wanted to discuss something. MC said he had a request for him. A difficult one, but very important. He wanted them to meet with the Elf King as his envoys. He wanted to enlist the elf's support, as this matter involved spirits. She asked with a worried look what had happened in the half-dragon village. He recounted what had happened, and she said she couldn't believe demons were involved. He agreed and said that in order to save the world from demonic intrigues, he needed to enlist the elves' help, so they could cooperate with the spirits. She understood him and said that they would do everything possible to help him. Fair listened, thought about it, and said in a serious tone that she needed to try her best too. He called her name, and she stood up abruptly and, with a serious expression, said that she was asking for forgiveness, but she would go her own way. She would definitely return, so they should wait for her. He was stunned by this and thought he had never seen her so serious. What was wrong with her? He agreed to trust her, and she thanked him with a slightly confused smile. Later, he thought that later that day she left the village. The next day, Philly and her companions also set off. She called the master and said that they were ready to go. Manaji began to search for something in his inner pocket, asked them to wait a second, and said that he wanted them to take something with them. He handed them a huge spiritual stone, which greatly surprised them. He said that they would need a powerful artifact so that the elves would believe that they were messengers of the spirits. If the elves doubted their words, they could be captured. This cannot be allowed. They must be extremely careful. She agreed and said that in that case, they would move out. He continued to hide from everyone the fact that his hands still could not fully recover after a long time.